This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome everybody to this week's episode of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Thank you so much for downloading episode 501. My guy Adam, the Jock Strozinski, is here. He took in all of the Underwear Olympics, 4 great days of action, a massive performance by a quarterback that's just shooting up the draft boards. Obviously, there's implications for the Detroit Lions, sitting at number 6. An NFL quarterback is on the market. Maybe the Lions could potentially make a bold move. We got a lot of juicy stuff to get to, and we'll finish the podcast kind of talking about the Michigan Wolverines and where they're at in regards to their pursuit of getting into the NCAA tournament. Because, boy, was the Combine fun this year. And I know people talk about workout warriors and how people and NFL teams should look at film during games as opposed to workouts. But this year, it seemed like based on how they made a little bit of changes, not having workouts start so late at night, it made it much better starting around 3 o'clock most days. So I took in most of the Combine. I liked it. I thought the coverage was a lot better. And I felt like even though some of the top players kind of took a detour, there was drama with Jalen Carter. There was epic performances with Anthony Richardson. I thought this year's Combine was at least a lot better than last year's.
The only thing I would say that I was really disappointed with was Rich Eisen. And look, you take enough of this in, you listen to enough of Rich Eisen, and look, he's put in a tough spot. My man's got to talk for hours on end, and he's got to fill for hours on end. At some point, you need to give this man a break, because there were points where I was listening, and I was like, come on, man, like, you're killing me here. You are zapping all of the fun out of this. And he's trying to make it fun. He's trying to be light with it. But boy, after like day 3, I was kind of like, all right, I'm just going to watch this on mute, because it was just enough with Rich Eisen. And I like Rich Eisen, but I think you're right. I think it was really good moving it back a little bit. It was interesting to watch these guys go out and perform this year, because I really feel like this set of Combine workouts really helped solidify a lot of the game tape that we've seen. I don't really feel like there was anybody that was a dramatic faller here, and I did use the word dramatic. I don't think they were anybody who you went into it and you're like, oh my God, these guys are going to be the number one overall pick, and then next thing you know, they're basically tumbling out of the draft because of the Combine. And that being said, I don't necessarily think there was anybody who necessarily shot all the way up. I kind of feel like everybody is kind of staying in the same rounds that we kind of thought, and the Combine workouts just kind of help back it all up. I mean, I compare it to last year where I really feel like Trayvon Walker. Like after last year's Combine, I was so in on him, and I thought he was going to be good, but he was a guy who I really think helped elevate himself, ended up being the number 1 overall pick. I think Aiden Hutchinson had a really good workout. We kind of knew he was going to go somewhere in the top 3, but he didn't really necessarily jump up the boards. And I feel like this set of Combine workouts was probably more like Aiden's workout, where you kind of had an idea of where they were going to be, and they just kind of went out there and they solidified a lot of that. I think the one guy who we need to talk about, and I did not put him on the rundown, I did send you an email after I sent you the rundown, was Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson's performance was crazy. Dude is an absolute freak athlete. And I think we all kind of knew that, but I think it's astonishing when you actually look at his numbers and you look at what he was able to do, and then you watch him throw that deep ball, and he throws it with such ease. I think it was bonkers to watch him perform the Combine. What was your takeaway of him basically running through all of the drills and then lighting it up down the field?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the size, speed, athleticism. It was one of the best Combine performances you're ever going to see. Now, of course, we all understand that quarterback play at least involves a lot more than just being physically ready. But boy, when you're starting to look at the mold, if you're a 244-pound quarterback, that means you can take hits a little bit more. You can tolerate maybe even some contact. And when you can elude defenders at that rate and you can have sub 4.5 speed as a quarterback, that gives you a lot of advantages. And here's the thing that people kind of get fixated on. Is Anthony Richardson a finished product? No. Would you throw him out on the field right now? No. But what's the definition of coaching? I mean, if you listen to the shit that we said 5 and 10 years ago, you'd be like, these guys are assholes. And now you probably would say, yeah, these guys are still assholes, but they sound a lot better. They sound like they're much more smoother. They have this shit down. And I just think that people get so fixed in on he had accuracy issues at Florida. Yes, he did. But now he'll be in an organized system depending on where he goes and depending on the coaching that he gets. The finest nutrition, the finest training, the utmost amount of film review. That's why I love him with the Lions, because if you can put him in a great environment with Ben Johnson and Jared Goff, I mean, what better opportunity is there to have a quarterback meet his potential? So I think people that get all butthurt about Richardson and where he's at just are scared. And people feel like, yeah, I understand it's a big risk if the Lions were to do it, but I would credit the Lions for taking a stab, because the idea is you take a quarterback like Anthony Richardson, you develop him in your system, you get him cheap. Now you can surround him with supreme talent as opposed to paying a quarterback $50 million. And now you have the opportunity to do what the Chiefs did. So I'm not opposed to it. I love what he does, but unfortunately, here's the problem. What did you hear? And maybe it was a little bit of gamesmanship, but it seems like Pete Carroll and the Seahawks fell in love with Anthony Richardson, and I don't see him getting past 5, in my opinion.
Oh, that's interesting. So how many quarterbacks do you see kind of going in this draft? Because I think the one thing coming out of this combine was you had Bryce Young. I feel like he answered a lot of the questions the best he could. It's obviously it's going to be his size. It's going to be his durability. I thought CJ Stroud looked awesome. Like, CJ Stroud was a guy that we've got to watch a lot, especially living in Big Ten country. We've watched a lot of Ohio State games. I thought he looked amazing. I thought he looked great. Like, if he fell to the Lions at 6, I'm okay. I sign off on CJ Stroud. I thought he looked incredible. He was so fluid. He was so smooth. That's the word I could use to describe what I seen from him during the combine drills, was just smooth. You also have a guy like Will Levis, who's supposed to be the prototypical quarterback. And then you have Anthony Richardson coming out and just basically blazing a trail at the combine. How many quarterbacks do you see going in the top 6? Is there a situation where you do see maybe 4 quarterbacks going in the top 6?
Yeah, because you probably are going to have potentially even some teams moving up. Maybe the Panthers are really interested at number 9. They're in line potentially to take a quarterback. I could see 3 to 4. Obviously, Bryce Young, number 1. Maybe a shocker. Maybe if the hype machine continues moving forward, maybe Richardson goes 1, which then pushes some things down, which will be really intriguing. Richardson is the outlier, is the variable here that could make the draft so spicy.
He's kind of the guy where the draft is going to hinge on, right?
Yes.
At least early on, he's going to be the guy that the draft is going to hinge on, because if he goes early, if he goes anywhere in the top 5, I think it's going to move a couple of guys down, and then the Detroit Lions are sitting pretty to basically stay at 6. If he doesn't go in that top 5, you could see some teams maybe making calls to the Lions and the Lions possibly moving back. But he, to me, feels like he's the key piece. There always seems to be a guy in every draft where the draft kind of hinges around, and things will get a little bit messy or things will get a little bit busy when that person is kind of on their board. So I feel like he's that guy. And look, I think a lot's going to have to be shown at his pro day, but I think he did a really great job of really helping to elevate his stock at this combine.
Sure did. And boy, even though his deep ball looked good too. So I was just shocked. What surprised me about the combine was I can't believe still in 2023 a player like Jalen Carter would come to the combine potentially knowing what the hell was going to happen with. Did he just think it was going to go away? Like, the timing was impeccable by the police. I mean, good Lord. The day of his appearance at the combine, you get word that Jalen Carter is going to be indicted for being participant in, unfortunately, a tragic automobile accident. Wasn't driving. You have to be specific and understand. He wasn't driving, but he was in the vehicle where it was going down, and potentially, allegedly, he was obviously at first saying some things that weren't exactly in line with the truth. Then he changed the story and told exactly what happened. Now, is it going to hurt his cause? I don't think so, because you hear it's going to be a misdemeanor and it's probably going to get pled down. But it's still a terrible, terrible look for a player. For me, it's questionable in regards to his character right now. I don't think it would preclude a lot of teams from taking him, but I do think that maybe for the Lions, that takes him away from a potential pick for Detroit, because they love clean-cut guys. I would be shocked if the Lions were to take Jalen Carter. That was the biggest surprise to me. Obviously, you see a lot of the great performances, like Jack Campbell, some tight ends that did well. Obviously, the Michigan guys did well. Ronnie Bell, Zach Charbonnet did very well. Jaden Reed did outstanding. Mozzie Smith. So I was impressed by a lot of what the Michigan contingent, the athletes collegiately from Michigan, were able to do. A lot of good talent really showed themselves to be amazing. And obviously, even though we know what Georgia is capable of doing, the athletes that they sent to the NFL was spectacular. I mean, you talk about defensive linemen, you talk about linebackers, you talk about defensive linemen. They have just put together such great talent that you're just sheerly impressed by what Georgia has become under the watch of Alabama. I mean, Alabama was it for the past few years, and then all of a sudden Georgia just came in and was like, I thought the highlight of the combine for me was, after running an amazing 40-yard dash, they interview, I think it's Nolan Smith or something like that.
Nolan Smith, yeah. He ran they clocked him like 4.43, and he was pissed.
Come to Georgia. We eating steak, lobster. We got facilities. We got big screen TVs. We got new restaurants, barbecue coming in. And he's sitting there doing a promo for why Georgia football is amazing.
He was out there recruiting,
I said I wanted to call and say, hey, if I paid a couple grand, can I come to Georgia for a couple semesters? Shit. It looked like it was fun, and it was amazing. I just was so surprised by how well not only obviously Georgia has, but they all worked hard and all lit up the combine.
Here's the thing. Recruiting season never stops. It never stops in college football. He was out there recruiting. He was basically doing what Kirby Smart couldn't do. So he had the television. He knew everybody was watching. He knew there was a lot of potential recruits out there, and he's basically saying, "Hey, come to Georgia. This is what you get." And look, I was blown away by Nolan Smith. What Nolan Smith did. I'm looking at, there were a bunch of players that impressed me, right? Specifically from the DNs, what he was able to do with that 40-yard dash. And he ran a 4.43, and he looked smooth, he looked fast, he looked quick, and he was upset with the 4.43 is what they told him he was clocked at. Again, it was an unofficial time. They went back and adjusted it, and it was a 4.39, which dude had afterburners on. And he still felt like he could run faster than that. So this is a dude who is obviously very quick, has an immediate burst, and has the ability to get to the quarterback. As far as Nolan Smith goes and his future in the NFL, I worry a little bit about his size. I wonder if he could hold up to the rigors of a 17-game season. But all that being said, this is a guy who is going to make an immediate impact on a defense. I feel like you almost have to use him kind of like Von Miller. Von Miller, when he came out of college, he was a little bit slight. He had that quick burst. He was fast. He could play in coverage, but he was a little bit on the slighter side. So it's one of those things where he's going to have to kind of grow into his size, and hopefully he can still remain quick and elusive like that with that extra weight. There were a bunch of guys who did impress me at this combine workout. I do want to get into some of those guys, but real quick, I do want to double back on your Jalen Carter conversation that you kind of touched on. If he falls to the Detroit Lions at 6, I feel like the Detroit Lions would be silly to not take a chance on him. Or if for some reason he gets past 6 and he falls to them at 18, again, I feel like you'd be silly not to take him there, because this is a guy who, going into this draft, he was the number one player. He was the number guy. Everybody said this is the number one dude. He's going number one. Doesn't matter who's taking him. He's going number one. Doesn't matter if you need a quarterback. You're taking this guy number one. If you get all the information and things get worked out, right? Because you and I both know we're no dummies. We don't keep our heads in the sand. things sometimes seem to get worked out when you're a player of this magnitude. If you can bring him in, he immediately impacts your defense. And the one thing that this Detroit Lions team has been lacking is that body up front, that guy in the middle, that defensive tackle who can just kind of take over and change a game. That could be this guy. That could be you pair him with what you had with Aiden Hutchinson and you had with Houston last year. All of a sudden, that defensive line becomes that much more of a formidable front. And it makes your linebackers look better, and it makes your cornerbacks look better. All of a sudden, Jeff Okudah looks like he is worthy of that. What was it, the third overall pick that the Lions end up taking him with? So you add a guy like that to this team, and it instantly skyrockets. But going back to guys who impressed me, because I do want to know who impressed you. Nolan Smith was one of them. I'm going to mess up his name. He's the D end out of Northwestern. Abidawa Abadaware.
Yes.
He was impressive. This guy's almost 300 pounds, and he was trucking up and down the field. He was awesome. Yaya Dabby, another guy who really impressed me. A guy who I think might be the second coming of Aaron Donald. And this is a guy who you were incredibly high on last week, was Kalaja Clancy. What did you think about him and his performance at the Combine? Because this is another guy where if the Lions end up going cornerback up top, or they go with a defensive end, or they go with a linebacker at 6, and he's there at 18, I do feel like you have to take him at 18. If you can basically get Aaron Donald at 18, you take it all day long. Is he the second coming of Aaron Donald in your eyes?
That's what a lot of people are comping him to. And boy, does he have the intangibles. The problem is he is a little bit undersized. He can get manhandled at times, but you see the makings of a defensive lineman that can be serious. And a lot of people have started to mock him to the Lions at number 18. That'd be fantastic. I think he's got the motor. I think he's got the intangible skills that you need. Obviously, he's really solid. And what you saw with his abilities is he's got this ability against the run to kind of shed blockers fast. But unfortunately, when you battle offensive linemen, there were times when you watch film that he did get stuck to offensive linemen, got pushed out of the way, which caused the defense to get gashed a little bit. But I think with development in the right system, look, you can't project someone to be the next Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is a freak, and he's a generational type talent. But I do see a productive defensive lineman that will, when he gets added to a roster and works out and starts learning, I think he's hungry enough. He's going to make some noise. He's going to cause some damage. And you have the ability to get these hungry guys, but still at the same time, I like girth. I like bigger guys. I just fell in love with Tyree Wilson, man. I think that when you see a dude put his arms out and it's over 80 inches wide as a wingspan, you're like, my God, he can grab up on people and fling them out of the way and cause disruption and get so much better. So I'm crushing on Tyree Wilson. Obviously, Christian Gonzalez did a lot of good things, but you look at it and you say, my goodness, I'm still crushing on Bijan Robinson. Boy, is that dude even better in person and on film than he is when you watch him in college. It was great to see him work out. It was great to see his speed and abilities and everything that he's doing. So I think that as a talent, I'm still crushing hard on him. And I wouldn't be, look, guys, all you can do is go off of history. If the Lions go Tyree Wilson and then decide to kind of be aggressive again and trade up to 12 or 13 and make a move and use a second rounder or an additional pick from next year to get Bijan, I'm okay with that. I'm okay if they do that for a quarterback too. Look, it's okay, guys. They have several other picks in this draft where you can get defense. You can, in this first round, you need impact. So if you go Tyree Wilson or Myles Murphy, the name that is a little bit more concerning that's shooting up draft boards is Lucas Van Ness. Yes, he's talented, yes, but I think he's a little bit more of a question mark than others. But, boy, if you can get an impactful defensive lineman, you can take a swing at a quarterback or a running back, and I have no problem with that. I think people get too locked in on defense. Dude, trust Brad Holmes. He found talent. He found Kirby Joseph and James Houston later in the draft. Relax. If he does it, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I'm kind of leaning towards the in Brad we trust motif. I do want to say this. I want you to go back, and when you re-listen to this, I want you to grab the I Love Girth drop that you have, and I want you to add that to the drop board because that's going to be funny. At some point, we'll use that. But look, Bijan Robinson, this is where I'm at with it. I think you can get impactful running backs. I think there's a lot of really good running backs in this draft class. I think where this draft class is incredibly strong is, I think, at the very, very top, in a little bit in the middle, you've got some DN and you have some defensive linemen who can make impacts in the game just first year, coming straight out of college. You just plug them in and let's go. I think this draft is incredibly deep for cornerbacks. I think the Maryland cornerbacks helped themselves, and I was really impressed with both of the Maryland cornerbacks. Was not expecting what I seen out of both of those guys, and I could see the Lions possibly taking one of those guys in the first round. Now, when it comes to running back is another area where it is incredibly deep, and running backs tend to be a luxury pick. And look, Bijan Robinson will probably go in the first round. Does he go at 18? I don't know. Does he go to the Lions? I'm not sure. If I'm drafting, I'm not drafting a running back in the first round. Not when you've got talent like Jahmyr Gibbs, who absolutely put on a show at the Combine. Jahmyr Gibbs looked incredible at the Combine. Zach Evans, running back out of Mississippi, he looks good. Zach Charbonnet is a guy possibly get a little bit later. And if you're a Michigan fan, you're familiar with Zach Charbonnet. He performed pretty well here at Michigan, performed really well in UCLA. You can go and grab him possibly late second round, third round, maybe even fourth round, depending on what kind of goes in front of him. Tajay Spears is another back out of Tulane who looks really good. So again, possibly a later pick. You don't have to invest early in a running back. The reason I'm not a huge fan of investing early in running backs, look at it this way. Every time there's a tackle, every time a running back runs into that offensive line, it's essentially a car crash. You give a guy 20 to 30 carries every single game, you're basically sending him into a car crash 20 or 30 times. How long does your body hold up after doing that? It's very rare that you get guys like Derrick Henry who have been able to do it for years on end and continuously be productive. So it becomes kind of a risk-reward thing, right? If you can roll the dice, you can spend that first-round pick and you can hit big and you get your guy, you get your Derrick Henry, awesome. But for the most part, you're going to end up rolling snake eyes, and you end up getting Kevin Smith. You end up getting, we'll say, a DeAndre Swift, right? DeAndre Swift was a high second-round pick for the Lions. Can't stay healthy. Everybody's getting ready to move on from DeAndre Swift. And DeAndre Swift has been productive when he's played, but he can't stay healthy because, again, it's like running into a car crash every single time he touches the ball. So that's why I'm not a huge fan of investing that first-round pick, especially when you can grab another guy in the second round. You can grab a couple guys in the third round. There might even be a guy or two that you want in the fourth round who can come in and immediately make an impact. Watching the Combine, was there anybody that really just kind of shocked and awed you? Because I was blown away by what DJ Turner was able to do. The cornerback out of Michigan, he ran a 4.26. He was the fastest guy at the Combine. And I wasn't so much blown away because of what he was able to do with the 40. I was more blown away at the way Michigan didn't utilize this guy at all last year in the college football season. This is a guy who you should have been getting the ball to, figuring out ways to get his hands on the ball and allowing him to utilize that speed. This dude was incredibly fast, absolutely torched the 40-yard dash. And what really shocked me was the coaching staff at Michigan never figured out a way to utilize him as an offensive talent, never figured out a way to put him on a punt return team or put him on a kickoff return team or do any end arounds or jet sweeps or figure out a way to get the ball in his hand and utilize that speed, making him an absolute threat on the offensive side of the ball, especially when your running back goes down and you need him in basically the gauntlet of the season. You need an extra guy. This guy could have been that extra guy for you and could just ripped off with blazing speed. Was there anybody who just kind of, you were like, oh my God, that dude is an absolute stud?
Yeah, absolutely. Two, obviously have to show love to Jaden Reed from Michigan State, who worked out with a severe eye infection. I think when you see dudes that are dedicated and they want to get out there and work out, you look at Bryce Young, kind of, it's always awkward. I feel like the half in, half out workout is weird, where you show up and you stand there on the field while the other dudes are working out. It's kind of weird. I think they need to figure that out, where, yeah, you can be behind the scenes, do all the interviews, but stay off the field because you look stupid standing there with your backpack just kind of watching everybody throw. And also, when you see USC offensive lineman Andrew Voorhees tears his ACL. Like, dude worked out, tore his ACL, and he's back the next day and is grinding and doing the bench press. You're like, what the hell? It's crazy for somebody to be able to tear his ACL, have the brace on, but still be bold enough and tough enough to grind it out and want to perform. That shows a lot of character, and that's what the Combine is about these dudes showing that they're all about business. They're about being able to show teams that they want to be on the field and they want to contribute at the highest level. And that's what it is. It stinks because obviously all these guys have been coached up. Obviously it was funny to hear a couple of the draft prospects be like, I'm gritty, I'm tough, I love ball. Obviously knowing that the Lions would love to hear that. They've been coached up to say these things, but I'm always impressed with those that interview well and show their true character, and the Combine is a great place to do that. There is whispers that maybe the Combine may take a different form. Obviously more of the athletes like doing it in their pro day and to waive your – I think it would be funny if you were a football player. The second you would have read, you look down and you go, waive my motherfucking medical rights, all of them. What? I ain't doing that. And they're like, yeah, you have to sign a waiver and sign away all your medical rights to come do all these 32 tests. They're going to poke and prod you and ask about middle school injuries and sit in an MI room for 3 hours. You would have been like, fuck this shit. And you would have been like, come find. I would have been like, yeah, no. I'm a pro day guy. Come to Michigan State, come hang out, and come watch me do my maneuvers. This kind of organized thing is far too invasive in regards to the kind of shit you all want to do. And they do like psychological tests. And if you go and look, if you're an insider or things like that, they did a profile of what one day was like for Anthony Richardson. And I was tired just reading it. I was like, my God, you get there 8 a.m. and you start going through interviews and you're not done till 11:30 at night. And you're sitting in an MRI getting asked all these questions, psychological profiles, and doing all this board work. You're like, holy cow. It's a lot for these athletes. I give them credit for wanting to do it and showcase. But at the same time, I also respect those that are like, you're Bryce Young, and you're like, I've already watched the tape. I know what I got. Come to my pro day. It'll be more conducive to what is more advantageous for me. And I feel like for a lot of people, they kind of view it as, the only thing that can do is really hurt you if you're a top prospect. But others, that are trying to earn a job, they get out there, they work out, and they handle business and things like that. But at the same time, also, guys, take it with a grain of salt what Rich Eisen and Daniel Jeremiah say. Remember, they work for the league. They want to hype up the Combine. They want to hype up the league. They want to make sure that there's interest and strong interest. But at the same time, it is a good measuring tool for some information that you do see in front of the camera. So the interviews are always fun and stuff like that. So the Combine's always great, and I'm excited now to see what happens in certain mock drafts. You've kind of browsed mock drafts over the course of the last couple of days. But I do got to ask you this. Obviously, Lamar Jackson, it's probably way out of the realm of possibility to sign Lamar Jackson because you got Jared Goff and you basically built a football team around Jared Goff. I would love to inquire, at least throw out an offer, but what this conversation tells me before we get to the mock draft, I am having a hard time cognitively. And we've had this discussion, so it's not new to everybody that knows. I was against giving Stafford $27.5. I can't see Goff being worth $40 million. I can't.
So
I can't.
This is the thing. Like, if you look at these contracts right now, I mean, you look at what Daniel Jones just signed
40 for 15 touchdowns.
Would you rather have Jared Goff? Would you rather have Daniel Jones? You'd rather have Jared Goff all day long.
All day long.
So yeah, to me, it's absolutely nuts. I feel like the Detroit Lions always end up finding themselves in these weird spots where it's like you had a chance to draft your QB of the future, you didn't. You're in a position now where you could possibly draft your QB of the future, but you probably won't, and you probably get that top guy because you're going to be on the outside looking in, and you have Jared Goff who's here. He's doing a really nice job. He's good, right? Jared Goff is good. I don't think anybody's going to tell you Jared Goff is elite, right? But if you asked me, would you rather have Lamar Jackson? Would you rather have Jared Goff? I'm going to tell you I'd rather have Jared Goff because it's just how he fits this team.
Yes.
Lamar Jackson, one, I don't want to pay Lamar Jackson what Lamar Jackson's going to want. I don't want to give up the 2 first-round picks. I don't like having to completely reconstruct an offense to fit what Lamar Jackson does well, which is essentially run. It is all RPO and it is all running, is everything with his legs. Passing wise, he looks a lot like Bijan Robinson. It's kind of that drop back punt pass type of thing where he just kind of lobs the ball up. I don't want a quarterback like that. That's part of the reason why I'm out on Anthony Richardson, is because Anthony Richardson's deep ball is very, very good. Very, very good. But it's the short, the intermediate, and those 15 to 20 yard down the field passes that he struggles with. That's Lamar Jackson. Like, I get size-wise why they compare Anthony Richardson to Cam Newton, but Lamar Jackson and Anthony Richardson are kind of the same guy. Not great footwork, do a really good job running the ball, does a really good job with run-pass option, but when it comes to moving the ball down the field and throwing the ball down the field, it's a little bit of a liability, and it's the stuff that is kind of underneath, the stuff that should be easy for your quarterback, completing the 60, 70, 80% of your passes, they struggle with. So that's why I'm out on a guy like Lamar Jackson. Yeah, it'd be fascinating to see him in a Lions uniform. It'd be fascinating to see what his offense would look like. But I'm cool with sticking with Jared Goff. I don't know if I'm cool with sticking with Jared Goff for $40 million or $40+ million. That's where it gets weird. That's where, if you're the Lions, I think you kind of have to sit back and maybe have a conversation, at least internally, and say, hey, do we maybe approach Jared Goff? Because everything is really good right now. He's really happy. We're really happy. The city's really happy. Everybody's really happy with Jared Goff. And do we maybe give him an offer for a 3-year extension that is much more palpable, somewhere right around the area of $35 million a season, and see if he takes that or if he balks at that? Because the Lions are in a good spot, right? They don't have to pay Jared Goff. They don't have to give him any money. They don't have to do anything. He's basically got 2 years left on his contract, and the 1 year is really all they're beholden to. So, again, he has another year to go out and prove it. They don't have to do anything. But financially, does it make more sense for this team to possibly lob a bit of a softball offer out there, get a little bit of that guaranteed money, right? Like, you know what you're working with for the next couple of years, because it seems like everything is about to hit the escalator button and everything is about to just increase. You look at what Patrick Mahomes was making. You look at what Kyler Murray ended up signing for. You look at what Lamar is asking for from Baltimore, and that's why they put the franchise tag on him, the non-exclusive franchise tag, so he can negotiate with another team. And if they don't want to match, they don't have to match, but they have to get 2 first-round picks in return. Look at what Kirk Cousins has made. You look at what Deshaun Watson has made. You look at what Daniel freaking Jones just signed for. Tells you that the quarterback market in the future is going to be very, very expensive. And if you don't necessarily get your quarterback now, you don't necessarily get your quarterback in the future, you don't have a game plan to get your quarterback in the future, you could be in a tough spot when you've got to re-sign Jared Goff and bring him back for more than $40 million. And that is tough to do. That is part of the reason why very early on, when we started looking at stuff with the draft, and I would go through and I'd do my own little mock drafts, I'd do my own little simulations. I was always trying to move out of that 6th pick, and I was always trying to pick up stuff for 2024, for that draft. So that way you can bundle some picks up, because next year's draft class for quarterbacks is supposed to be very good. Very good. Caleb Williams, you talked about him a couple of weeks ago. Maybe it's been a month and a half now. You talked about Caleb Williams and how would be your guy going into next year. And that's the guy who I think everybody's kind of eyeballing, and they're like, he could probably be the number 1 overall pick. You get enough draft capital, you can package it all together, you can move up and go get that guy and not necessarily hurt yourself in the future. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens with that QB market and how all of that plays out. But I have a real hard time paying Jared Goff more than $40 million, much less $40 million a season. It is tough, man.
Very tough. But with the cap going up, it might end up being even less of a percentage of the cap than he's making now. That's how crazy it is. When you up the salary cap, you then have an opportunity. This is why you should feel confident as a Lions supporter, because he's got big incentive to go well north of that. If he wins a playoff game, maybe even 2, now you're talking 45, 50.
50 million, yeah.
It's just crazy numbers to think about. I don't want to think about it anymore. I just want to say that I think that's why you must draft a quarterback and maybe even consider avoiding that at all costs. And remember, guys, it might be tough to play hardball, but Jared Goff is under contract this year and in 24. You don't have to. You can be a little bit of a stickler and not give him that and make it well known that, okay, at 30 years old, we're moving in a different direction. But it's going to be a big test for Jared Goff in 2023 to earn it. And eventually, if he wins some playoff games and he does some things that are spectacular, he'll be the guy that eventually does get the big fat contract, and we'll have to sit here and live with it. Because you do realize the general manager is going to build a nice team around him with an offensive line, running back, elite wide receiver for a couple years, and you'll start to see what it does bear out. So we'll see what happens. But Lamar Jackson to Detroit, it's fun to talk about, but I don't see it happening. I think that in the end, he'll end up with the Ravens just at a vastly different number. He's not going to get guaranteed money, fully guaranteed. He'll probably get $45 million, at least 4 or 5 years of it, a big chunk over $100 million guaranteed. But yes, guys, it's not. I think the funniest revelation this week on Twitter is all these people going, I am shocked that these owners don't want to pay guaranteed money. You guys got your head buried in the sand. These are old, rich white people. They don't want to pay shit. They don't want to guarantee contracts to football players. It's not
here's
changed.
The thing.
It's not new. It's not surprising. It's not collusion. It's just a fact. These owners want to do what they can to extract as much money as possible and pay out as least as possible. And they want to figure out how can we get more from our partners so that we can kind of even out these costs. So for Lamar Jackson to represent himself and then to have all these athletes going, what's going on here? What? All these teams don't want him and they need quarterbacks because they don't want to pay his guaranteed rate. Guaranteed, meaning the guy just had injuries. It's funny how people leave shit out and don't recognize that the man did have some leg injuries and he did kind of start to show a me-first attitude by not showing up to the field and at least supporting the fellas. So don't bury your head in the sand, guys. Yes, the owners are rich white and they're cheap. And just look at some of the I think the best thing caused this year. If you guys didn't see it, go to NFLPA.com and check out some of the grades that the players left facilities and shit like that in terms of what lengths owners will go to avoid paying. You know, it's classic. It's classic that people are like, oh my God, they don't want to pay Lamar guaranteed money. Yeah, he's looking for that one team that's stupid enough to do it, but I think people realize, oh shit, we don't want to go down that road. The guarantee is not what these athletes, is not what these owners are into doing for these athletes. So don't bury your head in the sand. It's very funny to see. One last thing here. We got about 5-6 minutes left. Boy, it was probably the most disappointing basketball game that you could see when Michigan is up against the wall pressed and they blew another lead against Indiana. Now, granted, it's on the road, and granted, we know that Juwan Howard sometimes X's and O's doesn't execute great, but with that much on the line, and now knowing that it's going to be even harder for Michigan to potentially get out of the Big Ten tournament, I just think they got to win 2. Just win 2 games this week and handle your business. You have a chance. I think they do get into the tournament, but what it revealed was, man, Juwan Howard just has to kind of do a little bit more. It feels like he's plateaued as a coach and is not maximizing the talent that he has. I mean, number 1 recruited class, number 1, and you're not getting a lot out of it. Maybe you'll get lucky and Hunter Dickinson will return next year, but it does feel like this year for Michigan and Michigan State hoops-wise has just been a colossal disappointment.
It's been completely frustrating. And as a Michigan fan, I'm ready to move on from Juwan Howard. I don't feel like he gets the most out of his players. I don't feel like there's really any coaching going on. You look at the recruiting class that's supposed to be coming in next year, it's abysmal. To me, it really feels like Juwan Howard showed up, had a bunch of Beeline's players, and basically rolled the balls out and was like, let's go play basketball, guys. And he basically let them play basketball. I feel like what he was able to get by on is the recruiting of John Beilein and what John Beilein was able to instill in these players. And then you fast forward to now when it's basically Juwan's guys, you're not seeing any progress. You're not seeing any steps forward. You're not seeing a coach really get the most out of his players. You're not seeing players step up and be leaders. It is incredibly frustrating to watch Michigan basketball. You have 2 games where your season is essentially on the line, and you just crap the bed. You crap the bed, and then you just go and you roll around in it. You now put yourself in a spot where you've got to really do some damage in the Big Ten tournament to be able to sniff a first four in and possibly go and play in Dayton. Like, let that sink in. This is a team that has played for 2 national championships in recent years. This is a team that has made it to the Final Four multiple times in recent years. This is a team that usually gets into the NCAA tournament and makes quite a bit of noise and is regularly playing the second week. And now you're talking about a team that has to hope and wish and pray that it wins enough games in the Big Ten tournament to be able to go and play in Dayton in a play-in game. Like, how sad is that? As a Michigan fan, that is just utterly disappointing. On top of it, the Big Ten has been absolutely horrible this year. The Big Ten Conference has been just dog shit, and there's no other way to really put it. Now you're in a spot where you've got to win a game against Rutgers on Thursday. Then you've got to go and you got to play Purdue. Good luck with that, because that's been the best team in the Big Ten. And then I feel you've got to get by both of those games and then move on. And if I believe the way the bracket shakes out, you'll have to play whoever wins against Michigan State. So good luck with that. It just, to me, you have put yourself in such a bad spot where this really should be fine-tuning some things, getting geared up, and really focusing and putting your attention towards the NCAA tournament. Instead, you are hoping, wishing, and praying that you can now get in there. And it all lays at the feet of Juwan Howard. If you're a Michigan fan, you cannot be impressed by what this guy has done. He hasn't developed anybody. He hasn't really done anything to move the program forward. If anything, he himself has been a complete and utter embarrassment with his time as head coach at the university, whether it is smacking players, or not smacking players, smacking coaches, getting into fights, getting into verbal altercations, having players basically just act like fools, like Hunter Dickinson acts like a complete bonehead a lot of times. You have guys on this roster currently that are talented. You take Hunter Dickinson. Look, I don't think he's going to be any great shakes in the NBA, but Hunter Dickinson is a guy where you pair him with a couple of good recruits, you should be in tournament time every single time. You should have basically an automatic bid to the round of 32 and possibly the Sweet 16. And he just hasn't been able to do it. The formula is not right. What's been basically put together and orchestrated by Juwan Howard as the head coach of Michigan has been utterly disappointing. And I think it all culminates with this season. This season has been absolute crap. Don't be surprised if this team is playing in the NIT and this team gets bounced early in the NIT, because I don't think they're making the tournament. I think this team falls way short, because they don't have, I think they have, one quad, one win? Like Oof. One. You have like one win of any note, of any worth. Everything else has just been crap. And anytime you get a chance to win a game, a close game against a good team, you blow it. It's mental lapses. It's bad coaching. It's just not being in position to close out games. That's a bad, weak, soft team. And the thing is, you look at it, these players that are on this team, these are Juwan's guys. At this point in the year, at this point in his tenure, these guys should be stepping up. These guys should be playing. There's been a ton of NBA talent that has come through Michigan with Juwan Howard as the head coach. And what have you gotten? You haven't gotten anything with it. You haven't done anything with it. This is the one thing you can say that was better than what Beeline did, right? Juwan Howard was able to bring NBA talent here. John Beilein was grabbing 3-star guys and turning them into studs and getting them into the NBA. That's called development, people. That's what you want. Juwan Howard is getting guys who look like they're NBA ready, and he's not able to do anything with them. And that is frustrating. And I'm over Juwan Howard. I am ready to move on.
Yeah, from the excitement from last week, from recording, it kind of was a down week with Michigan State and with Michigan, and then you realize the Red Wings pulled the plug on their season. We'll dive more into it next week for sure, because we want to see, because Coach Lalone did come out and say, yeah, I got to do a better job of picking the boys up. Obviously, they're deflated. They're on a long losing streak. Steve Yzerman pulled the plug. It's ballsy, very ballsy, but I think he made the right call when he says, I didn't believe that this team was a Stanley Cup contender, and it kind of was, the writing was on the wall that Bertuzzi wasn't going to come back. So you get Michigan, Michigan State, the Pistons, and the Red Wings all at once kind of struggling, and it just felt like a big, huge power outage, and it kind of was deflating for that. Outside of football, and now the newness of the Tigers, Detroit sports kind of hit a lull last week, and it was really interesting to kind of see it all go down that way, in that you realize, wow, Steve Yzerman kicked the can down the road again, but is doing it in a way that's how you do it. You build up a war chest, and now, obviously, I would hope that this is the last year that Michigan State, Michigan, and the Red Wings are in this quote-unquote taking a step back mode, because they all did. And that's the most frustrating aspect, is when you look at Michigan State and Michigan and the Red Wings, they underachieved. And that's disappointing at the highest level in Detroit sports. But now the accountability is there. The seat's a little bit hotter for Steve Yzerman, a lot hotter for Juwan Howard and Tom Izzo. But we'll see. March Madness is here, and follow along with Detroit Sports Podcast as we break it all down and watch everything going on in the world of Detroit sports. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Hit us up if you've disagreed, if you feel like Michigan's going to make a run, if you feel like State's going to figure out shooting at the three-point level and not turn the ball over. Hit us up. If you are totally on board with Steve Yzerman selling, and picking up more draft picks, hit us up at Detroit Podcast. Our 50 minutes are up because podcasting time was enjoyable. Felt good to kind of debrief a little bit about the Lions and their quarterback and paying, and so much good shit. I can't wait to do it again next week on the latest episode of the Doc and Jock Podcast.